Okay. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Thank you all for coming. I know a lot of the faces, I've met a lot of you before. This is a historic London Real event. It's our inaugural live occasion, an intimate day with Dan Pena live at the Ritz. And in a few minutes, I'm going to bring in my mentor, the $50 billion man, Mr. Dan Pena. But before that, I was just outside thinking that about 4 years ago, when I walked out of my career in banking in the city of London, just about 2 miles there, this is pretty much the last thing I ever thought I would be doing. But I just kind of went with my gut, and I followed my dreams and my passions, and here I am. You know, I know a lot of you are probably struggling with where to go next in your life and just trying to find out what decisions to make. And I was there because at the time I had what looked like everything. I had this successful career, I had the money, but something just didn't feel right. I wasn't taking risks. I wasn't thinking outside the box. I wasn't just getting uncomfortable, and I wasn't creating anything, and so something had to change, and so I just made that change, and some other things happened. And so I hope you're all kind of thinking today what changes you want to make. And if there's anyone that can help you with that come to Jesus moment, I believe it's Dan Pena, because he helped me have mine, and I know a lot of you have kind of watched our story. I guess it's a bit of a bromance now that I think of it. That just came to me now. With Dan, I don't know if you know the story, but about a year ago, I received an email from Guthrie Castle, which might sound strange to get an email from a castle, but I get a lot of strange emails. I get emails from people who know how to levitate. I get emails from people who want me to smoke things with them. So this wasn't so strange. And they wanted to talk about Dan Pena. And I had actually heard of Dan before because he was mentioned in another episode we had because he had mentored a gentleman by the name of Peter Sage. Has anyone seen that show with Peter? Yeah, it was a really powerful show, and Peter and I had a really good connection, and Peter has some great messages. So I had heard of Dan. But when the castle broke down everything about Dan, the $50 billion and the castle in Scotland and the three-piece suits, quite honestly, I wasn't impressed. And I really didn't want anything to do with him. And so I avoided his emails and I avoided his calls. And one thing for sure, Dan doesn't like to be ignored. And I remember asking him later after the show, I said, Dan, you were really persistent, and you really stuck with me. You must have taken 2 months until I said yes. And he said, Brian, he's like, that's the way I do things. I decide on something, and then I go and do it. I was like, okay, that makes sense. And I think my problem is that when I went running away from the banking world, I ran away from capitalism and wealth creation and money, and I ran the other direction, which was probably towards spirituality. And in my mind, one didn't exist without the other. And I don't know if some of you have struggled with this. Maybe you all have at some point in your life, if one is with the other. And I think that's why I rejected Dan, because I was like, that's what reminded me of myself that I didn't like about myself. And so I think that was my reason. But he was very persistent, and so finally they kept asking, and I said, all right, just come on the fucking show. So Dan showed up, and we had this interesting conversation. I don't know if you remember, about halfway through, Dan starts getting in my face a little bit. And he starts getting in my business. And he said, okay, Brian, so is this the plan? Is this what you're doing, this show? Okay. Is that, he's kind of saying, is that all you got? And I pretended not to bother me. I kind of gave a laugh, but it did bother me. And there was a very famous line in that show when Dan says, Brian, if you want to build a future, if you want to take care of your family, if you want to give back to the community, that takes money, not Zen. And that's a famous line that's rung in my head for the time ever since, and it made the highlight reel. And it's probably quintessential Dan. And you could see his frustration with me and who he calls the London Reelers, who he groups everyone into this kind of person he thinks it is. And after the show, I remember standing outside with Dan on the pavement, and he stood there in front of me. We were getting in a taxi, and he stood there in front of me like this, and he said, "Brian." I said, "Yeah, Dan." And he said, "I change people's lives." And he said, "I'm going to change your life." And I thought, the old man is off his fucking rocker. But I said goodbye to him, and about a week later, the episode debuted, and it was a hit. And the numbers don't lie. YouTube always tells you right away. They say who's hot and who's not, and everybody loved Dan. And I had to give him that. I said during the show, I said, the London Reelers are going to hate you or love you, and the jury was out. And so I stayed in touch with Dan. We traded a few emails in all red caps in bold. I was going to put a slide up here, but I left the slides for Dan, especially the 80s looking slides for Dan. But I stayed in touch with Dan, and he kept emailing me back and forth. And finally, in August of last year, he invited me to dinner at the Ritz, of course, right across the hallway. And it was a Sunday night, and he made me put on a suit and tie. And I was pissed. I hadn't worn a suit and tie in 5 years. And I was like, oh, Jesus. But I went ahead and did it, and I'm making you all pay for that pain today. But I went to dinner with Dan, and he was a little abrasive at first, and my girlfriend was with me, and she's like, who is this guy? And I was like, all right. I said, expect a little bit of that. And about halfway through the meal, he said, Brian, you need to come to the Castle Seminar. I really want you to come. And I thought about it, and I said, I'll think about it, and I gave it a few weeks, and just finally part of me said yes. But I was really struggling with that decision, and I think part of me knew it was going to be painful. And I know I liken this a little bit to some of my experiences in the past with things like ayahuasca. I knew I had to do it, but it was not going to be fun. And so I decided to go, but even up until a week before I went, I was thinking of excuses, knowing full well Dan was going to give me an earful or say I was a pussy or all that stuff. But even a few days before, part of my brain was thinking, oh, okay, I've got this crisis at home, I've got to do this episode. And now I'm learning my subconscious, that's my way of, it's like almost your ego know it's going to be destroyed and it's trying to protect itself a bit. And so luckily I pushed through, but I had my bags packed and ready to go on a moment's notice. I was ready Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of that seminar. Brian was there, Robert was there, to leave if Dan disrespected me. That's what I was ready for. So, but I made it there, but right when I walked in the door, I just felt differently about the whole situation. And the rest is pretty much history. You've probably seen the videos I did before and after the castle. I act different, I'm different. My dad watched us, and he said, both of you are different in that interview after the castle. But in the first one, I looked kind of like a punk kid. I still have my goatee. And afterwards, I don't know, I seemed different. And since I came back, I act different. You've probably seen I'm a lot more open. I'm a bit more proactive about my business. I dress different. This isn't part of the Dan Pena dress code. It's not part of the QLA. It's just when I got back, quite honestly, I couldn't physically put my old clothes on. If you know, I used to wear the combat trousers and the boots and all that, and I just can't put them on anymore. It's strange. So I don't know what really happened to me up there, but something did. It's funny, my 11-year-old daughter came up to me about a month afterwards, and she just walked up to me, and she was kind of concerned, and she put her hand on me, and she said, Brian, what did that $50 billion man do to you? From the mouths of babes, right? So if she can see it. But if I have to put my finger on two things that I noticed up there about Dan, it's this. And like I said, a lot of it I think just happened subconsciously or just by inspiration. But those two things were this. Dan Pena, in my mind, is 100% absolutely and completely congruent. As in, the Dan you see is the Dan he really is. And the Dan from the front is the Dan from behind. The Dan in the three-piece suits is the same Dan that you see when he's in casual clothes. And everything that he says he is. And I was up there waiting for the cardboard castle, and I was waiting for all these little things, but there was nothing incongruent. You know, the 9-hole golf courses, the greens are cut this tight even though no one plays golf on it. And just all the little things, I was just like, okay, wow, the game is tight and everything is run really well here. So, and everything that Dan says is true. Either that or they're the best fucking stories I've ever heard. So either way, it's just powerful being around him. And the only other thing that I can think about that really hit me, and it hit me from the first day, is that Dan actually gives a shit about your success. And I've gone back and forth with him about this, and he says he's not Mother Teresa, and that he doesn't give a shit, and maybe he doesn't. Maybe it's just because he wants to put all of our numbers on the board, because he's now the $50 billion man, because that's the amount of equity and value that he's created through his mentoring programs, and he wants it to be 100 or to be a trillion. And maybe that's true, and maybe that's good reason enough. But part of me thinks there's something else to it. I think that he just hates to see wasted potential. I just think it bothers him. You know, he's a military guy, ex-military guy, and I think that's what he saw in me in that studio. I just think he's always says to me, he's like, Brian, I see so much potential in all of you. And I think it just pisses him off. So those are my takeaways from Dan. And so all of you are here today. This was an event that we wanted to put on. It was sold out in about 6 hours. It's been oversubscribed about 5 times. There were people emailing this week that wanted to be on it. But Dan and I chose all of you to be here because we saw potential in all of you. You're not here because you're the richest or because you're the best business people, but it seems like you want to make some changes and you have some positive aspects, and I kind of feel the energy in the room already. And I always said, Dan Pena is great on London Real, and I think we've done a great job of trying to get Dan portrayed if you're going to do it on video. But I always say he has to be experienced in 3D. You really have to feel Dan's energy and have him really get up in your face and feel what he's about, because in my opinion, they just don't make them like Dan Pena anymore, and they never will again. So part of me feels like I'm just with a piece of living history that's just not going to be here anymore. And so I just feel like I want to spend time and be around him and see what I can learn. The bad news is today is that this isn't going to be a lot of fun. This is a time to get uncomfortable. And this is the time to really look down inside and think about those big changes that you have to make. Because I would guess that for 99% of you, the problems you're having are not about your business. They don't lie in the market. It's not the economy. It's not your friends or your business partners or your wives or your girlfriends. It's most likely you. It's in your head. And I was there too. You know, maybe it's a fear of success or a fear of failure or not taking enough risks, or maybe you're too busy tinkering in your business, working on your business and not in your business. There are a lot of different pieces, but it's really going to come from inside of you. So I would recommend that you just try to take your ego and check it at the door. It's going to want to fight, I know, which is why I tried to avoid going to Scotland that time. But for the next 4 hours, 8 hours, if you could just try to check it at the door and just try to open your mind to some of the ideas in here and just see what you think. It's funny. Dan always says that on the third day of the seminar, people come up to him and they're like, Dan, I love what you're saying, but when are you going to talk about the fucking money? And Dan always laughs because that comes on the fourth day, because most of our problems don't have to do with the business. It has to do with things inside of ourselves. And so that's something I would like you to try to think about today when all this happens. So in a few minutes, I'm going to bring out Dan, the man himself. Just a few schedule ideas and a few details. Just no laptops and mobiles in this room. If you can go to airplane mode, just for the speakers and things like that. I'm going to bring Dan out soon. He's going to have you for the morning. We'll have a short coffee break at 11 o'clock. Then we'll go through to lunch at 12:45. It's a working lunch, so we're going to bring the food out here, and I'll be up here with Dan during the lunch, and I'm going to field a lot of the questions that you submitted. So I'm going to be asking him to answer your specific questions. And that'll go on for an hour. It'll be much more casual. We'll be having lunch, and we can talk more freely. And then at 2 o'clock, it's time for me to get uncomfortable. I'm going to come up here with Dan, and we're going to do a little case study on Brian Rose. And we're going to break down what I was doing or wasn't doing, what happened to me at the castle, what I've been doing since I got back, what I'm doing right, and I'm waiting to hear what I've been doing wrong. So I think Dan's going to be not so nice to me. So if I'll be joining you in the uncomfortableness. And it'll be interesting for you all to see what goes on, all the details, if you want to know about the weekly calls and the monthly things. But really be interesting for you to see what I'm learning and what I'm figuring out differently. After that, we're really lucky to have two of the gentlemen that were on my course in Scotland that decided to come today, fly from Canada, from Germany, and that's Brian Mustard and Robert Mayer, who's here with his 15-year-old son, Christoph. Thank you so much for being here. And we're actually going to dive into their progress as well. They have a little bit more of a classic Dan Pena QLA model because they're building boards and making acquisitions with dream teams with me. I kind of have this media platform that I'm making better, and it'd be great to drill down and find out as well, you know, why Brian went there before, after. So they're going to be really open about their thoughts. So we've got that. After that, we'll have a quick break, and then we're going to open it up to questions from all of you. You can ask us anything you want, Dan, myself, or these other two gentlemen, and we'll do that for an hour. And then Dan will be back up here, and he's going to bring it all home for the last hour and explain to you why it's time to just fucking do it. And then we'll be done. We're going to go across the room for a well-deserved drink for about an hour in the reception. I might grab a few of you for some testimonials on video to let us know what you thought of the day. And then we'll have, for those of you that subscribe for that, we're having the private dinner with Dan, and we've got another a restaurant nearby that Beth can direct you to with a whole nother table that you can have dinner at. We're going to have a Facebook group opening, or as Dan says, a FaceFuck group opening up tomorrow with everybody's contacts, so you'll be in contact with everyone. You know, if I ask myself what's going to be a good day, it's not going to be if you come up to me at the end of a day and say that was a lot of fun or that was great, Brian. What's really going to make me happy is if I get that email from you in 3 months or 6 months or 9 months and you'd say, I got rid of this business partner, or I made this acquisition, or I shut down this shitty business, or I made some big changes. So that's really the way I'm thinking about this, really long term. So I look forward to getting those emails from you. And that's it. I think our staff is all around. If you want to grab anyone, that's Beth back there. She's running the event. My better half, Mariana's here as well. If you need anything, there's other people around, so just ask them for anything. If you want drinks or anything else, just ask. You know, we're here at your service. And there you go. So here we go. Enjoy your journey. And now I introduce you to my mentor, the $50 billion man, Mr. Dan Pena.
Thank you very much, Brian.
You're welcome.
Good morning. Most of you shouldn't be here, and we don't give you your fucking money back. You're going to find out after well, some of you already know. Donald Trump, 2 or 3 years ago, made a speech in, legend has it, in Australia. Took 2 years to organize, yada yada, first class tickets, even though he's got his own plane. As legend or myth has it, I'll only talk if I think the audience is getting it, et cetera, et cetera. He made all these deals. You'd think it was Cameron debating what's his face. That never happened. He gets up in front of the audience, there's 3,000 people in the audience. And when he got behind the podium, all of a sudden from a lot of noise, you could hear a pin drop. And he walked around the podium, and he got in front, the first row, and he said, you're all expecting me to give you the answer. Where you find the Holy Grail? What's the secret fucking sauce? There is no fucking secret sauce. And I'm here to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, almost every single person in this fucking room is going to fail. Not fail once and fail fast and then do it again. Just fucking fail! Because there's a fucking reason why you paid X Australian dollars to come and hear me talk. And he turned around and left. Now, for the smart people that were in that room, which I had a couple of mentees in the room, they understood what he said. For all the other cunts in the room, they didn't understand. Because the personal development and the success business or whatever, I don't even know what a fucking life coach is. A life coach is a guy that has maybe 1 or 2 degrees that's out of work. I don't know what a life coach does. But as Ted Nicholas told me in 1993, Ted Nicholas, who's still alive, God rest his soul, who's the only other guy at that time, a high performance coach, and I invented the word high performance coach, or the phrase. He said, Dan, it's $1 billion business, $1 going around to 1 billion fucking people. As you would say, it's mental masturbation. And if you get anything out of this next 9-10 hours, and I hope you do, but most of you won't, because hope springs eternal, it's that quit wasting your fucking time, because it's not in you. And if you want to get up and leave now, we're not giving you your money back, irrespective of whatever fucking Brian told you, or might have told you, or we'll tell you at the break. It's called pay price to action. I don't look like the rest of the guys. I certainly fucking don't sound like the rest of the guys. And I'll be 70 in a couple months. I will have the same intensity and high energy the last minute that I close this thing down at 10 o'clock, for those of you that are having dinner with me, that I have now. I've been up since 20 to fucking 5 practicing, and I could give this motherfucker in a coma. I could give this motherfucker in my grave. And people say, why do you talk that way, Dan? Because this is the fucking way we talk. And the reason you've never heard anybody like this is because you've never been around a high-performance person in your fucking life. You're just jerking yourself off. By the way, how many non-English speaking people do we have in the audience? No, that pretend to speak English, you really don't. Verstehen? Okay. That's too fucking bad. You shouldn't have come. But normally what we do is, Robert, Bavarian Bob as he's called, we sit him next to the stupid Germans. How many of these non-English speaking people are German? No, okay. Well, you two are, but you're sitting next to your son. By the way, this is his son that just turned 15. When? How long ago did you have your birthday?
1 week.
To me, he's 14. And we got somebody I'm going to introduce a little later who's 16, and you'll see when I go through a couple of these slides. By the way, for an MIT engineer, this fucking thing's already 25 minutes late. And we're going to do 3 case studies today. Not like the fucking B schools at Wharton or Princeton or whatever, the London School of Economics, but there's 3 people in this audience that I personally have trained and am still training. One's from Canada, one's Brian QLA Rose, as I call him now, and one's Robert from Passau, Germany. We affectionately call Bavarian Bob. Now, raise your hands, Brian Mustard. Robert? Okay. We put them out, spread them out, so hopefully they won't be too inundated. But it's an important point to make here. Brian Mustard went to the Castle Seminar, and I'm not here to sell you fuck. I'm here as a favor to Brian QLA Rose, because I don't give a shit. I don't give a fuck if you drop dead in your fucking chair today. And we've had people piss their pants, shit their pants, and pass out hearing me talk. Pass fucking out, fall over their fucking chair onto the ground. And the guy that shit his pants, or shat himself as the English would say, was a partner in one of the big 4 accounting firms. We have any accountants in the room? Nobody brave enough to tell me, okay. He shat himself. My youngest son says, no fucking way, Dad, are you kidding? Does the shat himself mean the same thing as shit himself? I said, yes, he fucking shat himself. And he wrote me on Big 4 stationery. I didn't know I was still fucking alive till I shat myself. And I used to use it in the seminars, and the other accountants, professionals, says, Dan, you're giving us a bad name. can you take that fucking slide and, just tell the story like I'm doing now? But otherwise, it'd be right up there. And he signed the fucker. And he's still here in the city, and he's a senior partner at one of the big four. The person that passed out was a psychiatrist. She flopped over and hit her head on the fucking back wall, cut her head open. I said, leave her there. Fuck her, the cunt. Shalom, salam, wie geht's? Hey dude, maka shot, salute. Fuck you's your cunt. That's how they talk in Glasgow. And then they give you a Glaswegian kiss, which is a headbutt. Anybody here from Glasgow? Anybody here from Scotland? There's a reason why Andrew Carnegie, in his infinite fucking wisdom, left Scotland when he was 12 years old. My idol of all time is Andrew Carnegie. Not Steve Jobs, who I knew and have a lot of respect for. God rest his soul. But dollar for dollar, pound for pound, Andrew Carnegie was the greatest entrepreneur that ever was, and ever will be, probably. His fortune measured in today's dollars would be in the trillions. In the fucking trillions. Now, I came late to this game, as Sir Richard would say. If you aren't making a difference in other people's lives, you shouldn't be in the business. It's that simple. I don't believe that. But what I do believe is that unless you make wealth, you have fewer choices. I have a lot of choices, more than most people in this room, almost everybody in this room, because I've created wealth. You are making the mistake. You're trying to make a difference first, because that's politically correct. I believe with all my heart, and I just told Brian, this is an announcement, an exclusive, that political correctness is a manifestation of lack of fucking self-esteem, because you're all cunts. I've been called a lot of things in my life, but I mean, a cunt's not one of them. I'm going to say that again because I can just see it's glossing over like you're fucking dead, or you've been doing ayahuasca, and I'll get around to drugs later. Political correctness is nothing more than a manifestation of a lack of fucking self-esteem. Because you cunts all want everybody to love you. I don't want anybody to love me. I don't want anybody to even fucking like me. Do you think Donald Trump gives a shit what you think of him? Do you think Steve Jobs, when he was alive, gave a shit? Do you think Mark Zuckerberg gives a shit? Only you weak cunts give a shit. The man who views the world at 50 the same as he did at 20 has wasted 30 years. Muhammad Ali. Some of you have got 5 years experience, 10 years experience, 20 years experience, but you've got 20 years times one. You've been doing the same fucking thing for 20 years, so you've only got 1 year experience. I was up at 20 to 5 practicing. Again, I could give this fucker in a coma. Because I'm a professional. You expect to have macro results micromanaging your businesses. I'm going to say it again. You're expecting macro results through micromanagement. Loss of life is mourned, but only if the life was wasted. Spock. I can't do that thing, but anyway. Well, your lives have all been wasted. If you went home tonight and you ate a gun, nobody's going to give a fuck. In the cosmos of time, there's not a cocksucker in this room that's more than a fart in the wind. I'm going to say it again. In the cosmos of time, there's not a cocksucker in this room that's more than a fart in the wind, including Bill Gates, Zuckerberg, etc. There's no I in team, but there's definitely a you in cunt. I've met about 15, 16 people here. My schedule's posted. I normally stay at the Ritz. In fact, I always stay at the Ritz. So in the last 2 days, I've talked to wannabes, devotees, a few mentees. And the first guy I met with a couple days ago, a of Asian descent, but a Londoner. He's crying. I'll make somebody cry here today. And I asked him the question, do you think, first of all, how old are your children? He said 6 and 8, or 6 and 9. I said, do you think your children are proud of you? He says, I hope so. As soon as he said, I hope so, if your kids aren't proud of you at 6 and 8, you're fucked. And if you say you hope so, you're double fucked. And I said, do you think your kids think you're a cunt? He says, I don't know. Look at you. Tears start rolling down his cheeks, like this. Look at you. Look at you! Forget look at fucking him. This is a new Gallup poll. Just came out 3 days ago. Yous cunts fall into almost all the categories. Worldwide, only 13% of employees are engaged at work, meaning they like what they do. That's 1 in 8. Majority of American workers are not engaged in their jobs. 70% of Americans are emotionally disconnected. And their definition of emotionally disconnected and not engaged is different. I'm not going to explain it to you. You can read the poll. 19% in the US and 25% in the UK are disengaged. 1 in 4 are disengaged, meaning they hate their jobs. Unhappy employees outnumber happy ones by 2 to 1 worldwide. Most workers hate their jobs and have checked out. Checked out. The worst countries in the world are Asia, 6, 7, 8%, Thailand, Manila, and I believe it's, I can't remember the third country. Because, and this just reinforces what I've said for 22 years, and my 22nd anniversary for being a high-performance coach is next month, or excuse me, May 22nd, is that most people are living quiet lives of desperation. Most people are living quiet lives of desperation. Otherwise, you wouldn't fucking be here. And you're the winners of the fucking contest, which is a fucking joke. I told Brian, I said, what are you smoking? Well, which, you know, is more appropriate for him. What are you fucking smoking? These are the winners? You all have a different reason. You all got a different story, and the truth is you all got a fucking different excuse. I have a drill the first night that people come up to the castle, and I said, okay, how many of you have been one of the following? Physically abused, mentally abused, or emotionally abused, bullied, and I go through this litany of shite. And I said, how many? Raise your hands. Every swinging dick or a pair of tits that was in the room kept their hand up except for one guy. One guy. And I knew he was full of shit, and I walked right up to him, and I told him he was full of shit. And then, during the private time at the seminar, he sobbed. He sobbed, telling me his litany of shit that had happened to him growing up. But he couldn't admit it, even for a microsecond in front of the group. We didn't ask you to give examples, but some of you, we can't fucking shut you up. And by the way, you're not here to fucking bond. I saw you out there, it made me sick. And if I see anybody passing a fucking business card or that, I'll fucking slap you. That's why you are the fucking where you are now. Losers! Now, we got one guy who's got potential in here. And he wrote me this little email a while back. It says, Winnica, who's my longtime assistant. I'd like to share with Mr. Pena that after watching his first London Reel episode, he really inspired me. I was reassured to know his thought of living rich before you are rich is vital to condition your brain to help you along the way. After a few months, I called Rolls-Royce Mayfair, I believe that's Barclays Rolls, and had a tour of all the models. I did exactly like Mr. Pena, like Dan. Now I have the smell, the feeling, the images locked in my mind to visit and motivate me. This was a big thing to a 16-year-old. But my comfort zone has been raised thanks, Dan. I'll see you at the QLA once I'm 19 or 20. He also wrote me a bunch of other emails. Should I wait till I'm 19 or 20? Okay. Now, this is at Barclays Rolls, Mayfair. And there he is sitting. Would you please come up? Now, what were you cunts doing when you were 16? Just have a seat there, please. What were you doing? You were jacking off. That's what you were doing. In 22 years of coaching, less than that many people have done smell the leather. That's what I say. Go to the Rolls Deal and smell the leather. That many, and I've touched a couple million. Less than 5 motherfuckers have gone to smell the leather. Less than 5. Because that's what I did. And I was 25, 26 when I did it. And the first car, not the first car I had, but I've been driving Rolls's. I had a Silver Cloud. It was used since 1976. I was, 1972, I was 26 years old, before my 26th birthday. And I'm still driving Bentleys and Rolls's since then. Now, what if I hadn't gone to the Rolls dealership? Now, some of you, all of you are here, for the maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, because you've outgrown your vision. You may say that you haven't completed your vision, but I'm here to tell you, you've outgrown your vision. And you've run out of things that you can do. Because people only make change for 2 reasons, guys. Inspiration and desperation. And I don't see any inspired fuckers in this room. You're desperate. I've read your essays. Now, what if I hadn't smelled the leather? And what if he hadn't gone to the Rolls dealer? This is real. I don't make this shit up. He's got a chance to be a high-performance person. And he's had a tough, not as tough as I did, but his parents were well off, and then they lost their money, right? And then the sheriffs were knocking on your door, taking furniture away and shit like that. Okay. I asked him to be here because I wanted you to see what it is to be a potentially high-performance person in the fucking flesh. In the fucking flesh. And that's why young Christoph has a chance, even though he's got his dad as a dad, he's here and he just turned 15. Now, I actually am much, much better with young kids, as will exhibit another one of my phenoms. He came to me when he was 17. He's now 19. He wanted to drop out of high school, just like you. And I convinced him to stay. He gave up a seat, as I understand it, to Oxford, which are hard to get, I think. I don't know. Those kind of schools I didn't bother to apply to. And I don't want to embarrass anybody to ask how many Oxbridge fuckers we got in here, because then why are you a loser? I'm not going to do that. In the castle, I do that. He's now making 40, 50 grand a month. He's 19 years old. Most of you would sign a pact with the devil to make 50 grand a month today, this fucking microsecond. He supports his mother, his twin brothers, and his dad. He lives in Lithuania. And they grow up to be people like Klaus Kleinfeld on the left, with the premier of China, another one of my mentees, who came to me as a middle manager. 7 years later, he was appointed CEO of Siemens, 400,000 employees, 100 billion in revenue. There he is again at the World Economic Forum, which is a waste of time. You've read about Mikey the Pizza Boy, the midget, the sitting next to the good-looking blonde, who came to me with pizza under his fucking fingernails and said, Dan, I want to be Steven Spielberg. I said, what the fuck? You want to be who? He's about this tall. He's from Albania. So I told him what to do. I'm not going to go through the whole story. If you can read this, highest grossing film. He had his first premiere of his big movie a year ago, November, and he just sent me an email last night sitting with Robert Duvall, the actor, who he's directing in a movie. Who he's directing in a fucking movie. Mikey the Pizza Boy. He couldn't even spell fucking pizza. But he did what I told him to do. And when we get to the case studies here, and we talk about what Brian should be doing now, and what Robert should be doing, and what Brian the Mustard should be doing, the people that actually do and follow, instead of a 12-step program like AA, mine's a 7-step program. But there's two big differences between the 12-stepper and my 7-stepper. You gotta do my 7 steps. We don't have an Al-Anon to send your wife to. You either make it or you fucking don't make it. I'm not going to read this, but the guy that couldn't be here, who Robert convinced to come to my seminar 5 years ago, and a lot of you read books. I'm not going to ask you about the books you read. It's a waste of time. Better that you jerk off on your computer. This guy has never read a fucking book other than mine. He's never listened to a podcast. He's never been to another seminar. He has never done one motherfucking thing that all you stupid cunts do. And it talks about the 7 million deal and the 5 million, and he just did a 20 million, and yada, yada, yada. But he understands focus. He was on the Austrian ski team, world-class skier, until he blew his knee out. He understands commitment. Many years ago, 25 years ago, Bill Gates wanted to have Warren Buffett as his mentor. So being a good mom, his mom said, I'll have a dinner party and I'll invite Warren Buffett. This is all on the internet and Google. And so Bill Gates comes in to have dinner with his mom and his family, and he sees Warren Buffett sitting at the goddamn table. He says, what the fuck? And so they're sitting around, and there's a lull in the dinner conversation, as there will be sometimes. There wasn't enough alcohol yet. And so Mrs. Gates says, I'll throw out a question. What do you, and there's a lot of other successful people there. None as successful is Mr. Buffett. What do you attribute your success to? Simultaneously, Bill Gates and Warren Buffett came back and replied within a millionth of a second with one-word answer. One fucking word. Focus! That may be the only thing I know how to do, but I fucking know how to do it. Focus. I've looked at your little bios. Many of you should just turn the fucking key on your business and walk away. So another couple. These kids started using my shit at 13 and 14 years respectively. 13 and 14, they got my tapes on torrent. That's why I say, I give all my shit away. Why? Because I don't want you to use the excuse like they used to. Your shit's too expensive, Dan. So I give it to you cunts. Now you don't have that excuse. You still don't fucking do it. They got all the shit on torrent. These two young guys, last year, now I want you to pay attention to this fucking melon heads. They turned down $20 million for 5% of their company. They're 21 and 22 years old. I'm going to say it again. They turned down $20 motherfucking million for 5% of their company. Now they're 22 and 23. They got thrown out of their office building because they play my tapes so loud, like rock music. What were you doing at 13? Jerking off, making your computer, the keyboard sticky. Some people just need a sympathetic pat on the head with a fucking hammer. The reason you're here and wasting your money is because nobody's called you a cunt, nobody's called you worthless, and we need some technical assistance, which we've practiced now because of Brian being an engineer 38 times and it still didn't work.
deliberately sabotage my band, I will fuck you like a pig.
Oh, dear God. Are you one of those single-tiered people?
You are a worthless pansy ass who is now weeping and slobbering all over my drum set like a 9-year-old girl.
So how's it going with that studio band?
Good. Yeah, I think he likes me more now.
I push people beyond what's expected of them. I believe that is an absolute necessity.
I want to be one of the greats. And because I'm doing that, it's going to take up more of my time. And this is why I don't think that we should be together.
I would never let him put my son through hell. Why would you let him get away with what he did to you?
There are no two words in the English language more harmful than good job.
You don't know how many people I've said, dump your wife, dump your girlfriend, and he's easy on them compared to what I am. I got so many emails and texts, etc. Dan, you got to see Whiplash. This is you. Now, you've never met anybody like that. That's all I know. I may be the first alpha fucking male that you've ever met. And I don't want to be your friend. You want a friend by a fucking dog. I don't want to touch you. If I catch anybody doing texts or what do you call it, I'm going to break your fucking phone. So just before I forget. If people knew how hard I worked to get my mastery, it wouldn't seem so wonderful at all. Michelangelo. If you're not winning a war of life, you're fucking losing, no matter what anybody else might tell you. Man up or suffer the consequences of the future regrets. Today, if you all die tonight, nobody's going to give a shit. You will not alter the world one fucking iota. Hunger makes beasts of men and demons of beasts. And in that regard, because I was inspired by this young man, and because I was inspired and I got an idea, I was recently on Grant Cardone's What the Fuck Network, whatever it's called, and he did the confessions of a asshole in his little baby roles, and it gave me an idea, and I'm going to make 2 big announcements later on. And so I decided, well, fuck, I haven't done anything off the wall lately. I bungee jumped about a year and a half ago. So I started calling Jack Barkley to buy a new role, a stretch. And my wife is telling me, you don't need that, Dan, you don't need that. And so I keep pressing it. And then she says, Dan, I already bought you one. It's a surprise, but now you fucked it all up like everything else you do. Okay? So I haven't even seen it yet. And they delivered a new Phantom stretch to my house a couple days ago. I need a Phantom stretch like I need a third testicle. 400,000 pounds, what do I... It's not like I had bad-looking cars. I got a DB9 and a Bentley. But because of him and the idea that what I want to do with the Phantom, I went out and bought it. I have more choices because I've created wealth. You have no choices. And I'm not demeaning the fact that a lot of you had to borrow money or stretch to get here, pun intended, stretch to get here because you didn't have the money. But you already know that if you couldn't afford to come here and you're 30, 35, 40 years old, something ain't right. You already know that, right? Are you so fucked up beyond all recognition that you think where you are in life is correct?
Yeah, buddy, Rick.
Okay. Now, that's it. How do you... Somebody turn it off for me. Now, this is the foundation for what we're going to talk about. I'm going to talk about how I went from the barrio, being arrested 5 times, to Castleman, briefly. And Brian's got it all broken down into segments every 2 seconds or whatever the fuck. And so we're going to try, out of respect to him, for him, to follow it. You already look shocked. This morning in preparation, not that I need preparation, I looked at one of my podcasts and one of my MP3s. One on how to get the fucking money, which is a podcast I did recently. It's 46 minutes. I'm not going to embarrass the group by asking how many fucking listen to it. But if you listen to that, you shouldn't be here. I also listened to another thing that I've had on my site 5 years. It's called How to Create Deal Flow. Watching how do you get the fucking money and creating deal flow, you don't need to be here. You wasted $1,000 quid. But on my site, those are the 2 least watched, has the least amount of traffic on my site. The 2 most important motherfuckers are the least watched and listened to. Why? Because guys, you're only pretending to want to be successful. You're only pretending to want to be a high-performance person. I asked, later on after lunch, I'll talk about the 2 reality shows that appear that are going to happen now. But I was being interviewed by one of the production groups in Los Angeles. And she was the daughter of the Minister of Finance to Saudi Arabia. So she comes from a high-performance family. She said, I had to leave Saudi Arabia because I'm never going to amount to anything as a woman in Saudi Arabia. Anyway, so I said, how, and I was talking about one particular hedge fund, when they look at deals and they're looking at allocation of funds and they ask you about your work habits, etc., I asked the 2 that were interviewing me, actually I was interviewing them, what do you think that Blackstone, for example, looks for the entrepreneur to be working per week, hours per week, before they even consider his or her deal? I'll ask you, doofuses, dipshits, what do you think? How many hours a week? Was that 80? 90, yeah. Okay, anybody else? She said 60. Minimum 100. Or they're not interested in your fucking deal. Because they know when the shit hits the fan, it's you that they're going to have to depend on. I work 60 hours a week and I'm fucking retired, fucking around on cruises. I just came back from the orangutans in Malaysia. I didn't know till day before yesterday, my seminar that's April 1, I didn't know it was Easter week. I didn't know that the little cunts are going to have to be away from their family on Good Friday and Easter and what's the Jewish day? Passover. I didn't even know. I laughed. I fucking howled. Fuck them. I've scheduled seminars on fucking Christmas Day and then had to be told by my staff because I schedule them when I have fucking time. Now, I don't give a fuck when you have time. I didn't even know it was Easter. I don't give a shit either, but Full House. There's a lot of desperate motherfuckers out there. What do you think these guys, we have one gal, these guys and this one gal are going to tell their families? What do you think? I'm going to go get the fucking shit beat out of me by some fucking psychopath at his 15th century storybook home. So I got in a lot of trouble. That's an understatement. Before I was 10 years old, I was expelled, not asked to go home or suspended. I was expelled from grammar school 3 times before I was 10. Once for breaking a guy's arm in several places on purpose. Once for punching a guy in the face. In those days they had real glass in the glasses and almost blinding him. And once because I was on the 2nd floor, you would call it the 1st floor in Britain, and I dropped an aquarium on my teacher, trying to kill him. By the grace of Allah, Buddha, God, whoever, if he hadn't moved 6 inches to scratch his balls and the aquarium hit him in the shoulder instead of the head, I wouldn't be standing here probably. I was a bad motherfucker. And having spent time with my cousin, God love him, who stayed in that neighborhood, but my parents had the presence of mind to get me out. My dad was a cop on top of it, the presence of mind to get me out of that neighborhood. So I volunteered for the draft at the height of the Vietnam War, which isn't a sign of intelligence by any stretch of the imagination. but I knew I was either going to go to the military or go to jail. Although I wasn't given that choice, but I knew I could look down the road. And I volunteered to go to officer candidate school, infantry, Fort Benning, Georgia. And the first high performance act I ever performed was being commissioned as second lieutenant in July of '67. And it's the first high performance thing I ever did. And I realized I could compete, etc. And the rest has been, the world has been my oyster. That was the first high performance. Many people in this room have never performed a high performance act. You show me your friends and I'll show you your future. Most of your friends are losers. And that's why you're a loser. As Jim Rohn said, one of the few things I agree with him, God rest his soul too, I'm pretty sure he's dead, is that you're nothing more than the average of the 5 people you spent most of the time with. Now, who's that normally? Your mother? Normally. If your dad wasn't working, or if he was working, just your mother, an older brother, a grandmother, you know, right? Those are the 5 people. None of which are trained to train high-performance people. None of which. And you wonder why you are the way you are. Now, I was fortunate. My dad was an alpha male. Had been to 2 wars, the Second World War and the Korean War. And my mother, God love her, God rest her soul, read a Reader's Digest article about a book in 1946. I'm 1 year old. And it was this book. Up until 1995, when he died, it was the highest selling book in copies behind the Bible, 50 million, about child rearing. And my mother followed this like a religion. Self-esteem is built from 0 to 7 or 8 years old. So I had a lot of self-esteem. My mother did a lot of, one of the simple things is you never tell your kid no. Well, you've raised, for those of you who raised that, it's fucking hard not to tell your kid no. But my mother never told me no. My dad always said no, but my mother never told me no. Okay, so that was one thing my mother did different. Now you got to remember, my mother swam across the fucking Rio Grande River as an illegal alien to come from Mexico to the United States. So I chuckle when I see Obama and all these guys fighting about trying to keep illegal aliens. And I'm fighting like hell to get a Mexican passport now. It's not so easy. You'd think that I could get a Mexican fucking passport. I can't. And if I can't, nobody can. Okay, that's one thing that we did different, or that she did different. My dad was an alpha male. All his friends were alpha males. I am the first alpha male many of you have ever seen up close. And you wonder why you are the way you are. We had a very bright Chinese kid, the last seminar said, this is the alpha male that we always, never had and always wanted, the role model. That's not, I'm not trying to be your father, believe me, I don't give a fuck about you. I'm here selfishly, because I want to, when they put dirt on me someday, in 50, 80 years from now, I want to be known as the latter-day saint of high-performance coaching, the greatest high-performance coach that ever lived, much not dissimilar to what Napoleon Hill and his reputation. I'm the only one that talks about creating wealth because I'm the only one that fucking has ever created wealth. Did you ever wonder why none of the other guys talk about money? None of them. Not a fucking one. Because they haven't created any! The only money they ever fucking made is putting asses on seminar seats and selling you fucking books. You fucking morons. You fucking ain't right. So I had Alpha Male, I had the Dr. Spock book, and I rebelled against my cop dad, and I got in a lot of trouble, went off the Army made a man out of me. As it does. I believe that the world should go back to conscription where they draft people. I believe in that. I believe in that system. So, I found Great Western with $800. A lot of you know the story. I turned it into $450 million in 8 years in a collapsing market. With my infinite timing, I got into the oil business when oil was $41.40 a barrel. It went immediately to $6 a barrel. Everything I've touched, bought, was out of business before the ink dried. And I did it here in London, in the city. And so when the shareholders threw me out, because I got paid too much money, I own 80% of the company on the London Stock Exchange. What am I going to do? So one of my friends said, "You're a great speaker, Dan. Why don't you coach?" I tried teaching university one year. It was very unfulfilling. The kids were cunts, and they're 20 years ago, so I can imagine what they are now. I developed the QLA methodology. I went back and I reversed engineered how did I do this step by step, and I put together the 7 steps and I taught it. I thought that would be more than enough, since there was nobody else there had created anything, to collect a lot of people to follow my programs. That wasn't the case, because everybody would say, well, I'm not Dan Pena. I'm not a gifted speaker. What you're really saying is, I'm a cunt, and I have no balls. That's what you're really saying. But it took me 10 years to figure that out, and I'm fucking smart. And so, as I said earlier, I took away the excuse that Dan's shit is too expensive. I gave it away. I gave these seminars. This is the first gig I've done this century outside the castle, because these deals fail. You're all going to fail. Every fucking one of you in here. And if Brian told you any different, he's full of shit. Because one day, for the guys, one day sleeping with, who's the hottest chick around now, movie actress? Who's a hot chick? Does anybody sleep with, I mean, what the fuck, what's wrong with, well, pick one. Whoever, sleeping with her one time or sleeping with him one time does not make you a Lothario. A Lothario, gay seducer, a guy that gets chicks or girls, you know. So this isn't going to change your life. What it'll do for most of you, it'll reaffirm that you're wasting your time. Better that you go home and eat a 45 or a 38. And I know it's hard to get handguns in the UK, but I can help you out if you need one. I can help you out. When Brian was at the seminar, the second day, I think, he went back from the seminar room to his room. He turned off the lights. He lied on the floor, right? And he shut his eyes, more or less collapsing, because he's smarter than most of the guys in the room. I don't know how long it took Brian the mustard, but he realized how fucked up he was. And you all look up to him like he's something. He's not a fart in the wind either. He made a few bob, walked away from a successful career. I like the way he puts from banker to broadcaster. Banker to broadcaster. Well, maybe he's left-handed. Okay, banker to broadcaster. But he's got that. What do you have? Nothing. But his message resonates with a lot of people. You're all reelers for the most part. In most cases, that's not good. That's not good. Because most of the reelers don't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of. So I coached, I became successful, I created billionaires, etc., etc. I created Mikey the Pizza Boy, find kids like this. And I was discovered, more or less, by Brian Rose early last year, although I had to push him and punch him, and not physically punch him, and beat on him to be on his first show. And that first show was a success. And then people, want to do documentaries about me. They want to do, there's 2 reality shows in the process of being planned, one in the UK and one in the US. He interviewed me again, went to the seminar, he interviewed me at the end of the seminar. Now I've done, 20, 25 different podcasts. I initiated my own podcast, where I'm not interested in interviewing anybody because nobody got anything worth listening to. I mean, that's why I don't understand. And the reason why they listen to your podcast is because they're all melonheads. Because They're not bright enough to know that they got nothing to say, these other people. They got nothing to say. And if you think you're going to pay your bills with fucking Zen, eat a gun tonight. Speaking of Zen, I go to Asbury's biofuck conference in September. I didn't even know what biohacking was. Never heard of it. And my wife and I and one of my mentees, who's a biohacker, and I went into a room because I wanted to get a good seat because I wanted to hear DeSanta, the Spartan guy. I wanted to hear him talk. So I get there early, so I get up in the front row. But it was 5 or 6 minutes. The yogi or shaman or whatever he was late. So he says, I'm going to do one more exercise for you guys. One more. So he says, we're going to see if we can transmit through our third chakra. I said, what the fuck? I'm in the back of the room. And they told us to take this position and all this. And then I can see through it. And I kind of break the trance a little. And I tell Chris and my wife Sally, I see you. I got this position. And then Chris says, no fucking way. I says, yes fucking way. And I says, he's walking across the stage to the right. He's going back to the left. And the people around me start to gather around me, just like you're going to gather around me during the breaks, like fucking little melons. No way, dude! No fucking way! I've been meditating for 800 million years, and I never saw through my fucking third chakra, because you're a cunt! I have never meditated one motherfucking microsecond before that, nor since then. So, we're going to have lunch with a friend of mine the day after the seminar. And I got everybody in a buzz talking about this. And her name is Mary, and she had just died. Been pronounced dead. And the paramedics, when they're taking her back to the hospital, dead, they said, well, why don't we give the old, she's a good-looking woman, why don't we give the old hag a couple of jolts? She had already had 7 jolts that had fried her chest. Why don't we give the old hag a couple of jolts? I know it's just because they wanted to play with her big tits. But anyway, let's give the old hag a couple of jolts. And they brought her back to life. By serendipity, by fucking accident. I personally think they also fucked her, but that's me. And her husband, I know they banged her too. And so I went over to her house, the rich. He came to my first seminar, her husband. We had already known them. And so I said, oh, you got to tell me about this. Tell me. No, I didn't see the bright light, Dan. Well, what the fuck did you see? Dark. Dark. And I didn't even think of this. She says, but I did think. What'd you think about? I don't want to reinforce what you already know. Tell me the word. Please, Mary, tell me. Regrets. Oh, thank you. Thank you. I regretted. That's all that went through my fucking brain. All the things I didn't do. Regrets. I have been saying that for 22 years of coaching and 25 years before that. I've given a lot of eulogies. I'm a world-class eulogy giver, and I normally go and see the person because they're going to die, and they've asked me to give the eulogy, and I'm by the bedside. I'm listening to them, their last conscious words. Not one time has anybody ever said, I regret not having gone to the football game of my son. Not one fucking time has anybody ever said, I'm sorry I missed my sweet 16 birthday party for my daughter. Not one motherfucking time. They all say the same thing. I wisha, I coulda, I fucking shoulda. Their last conscious thought are fucking regrets. And when Mary told me this, having been dead, that it carries over, I was so fucking happy I didn't know whether to shit or go blind. I wanted to jack off on the fucking bar stool. Because I've known this. Because I know when the last conscious words are in my ear, I regret. It's got to carry over. We're all energy, right? It's got to carry over. Now just imagine if you fucking miserable cunts died tonight. The regrets you're carrying to the grave. So I'm a high performance coach. And I'm good at it. I'm great at it. I'm arguably the best that ever was. Certainly by measuring how much money I've created, wealth, for yous, not for me. For yous. And the number's a lot higher than 50 billion, but a lot of people want wealth, but they don't want notoriety. So I got about 60, 70 billion. I got to be on the down low. But as they start dying, I'll be able to release the numbers. But I got a lot more than that. And the reality show people, God bless them, I have probably about 10,000 stories. Epaulets, vignettes, etc., maybe more. And whenever I get with them, I go through 15, 20, they don't tell us them all. We got to save them for the shows. And I go, I could talk from now until I'm 100 years old. Don't worry, I got plenty of stories. Yeah, you're right about that. They'll run out of film first. And but in the beginning, the stories were my mentors. The QLA system is based on the mentor system. Mentor. And that's why it's a team. A mentor, dream team, etc. And my three mentors, great guys, Costa Gratsos, the former CEO of NASA Shipping Lines, the boyhood friend of Aristotle Onassis for 65 years. They swap wives, legend has it. What a great friendship that was, you know? In Costa Gratsos, I had Jerry Ormond, founder of Ormond Industries, the fastest growing company on the American Stock Exchange in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s. And I had Jim Newman, who wrote Release Your Brakes, who is part of the brain drain of IBM, along with Ross Perot in the early 60s. And those three guys mentored me for about 25 years. Costa not that long because he passed away. They used to say some of the greatest compliments I ever got. Costa Gratsos, you remind me of Aristotle Onassis when he was young. And you don't have to be an alpha male because, you know, there's two ends of the management continuum. There's the General Patton, Dan Pena end. Fuck yous, you cunt. And there's a Henry Kissinger end. Okay? And 95% of the world are at the Henry Kissinger end. 5% of the world is at my end. But you don't have to be an alpha male to make QLA succeed. But you better have some fucking alpha males on your dream team. Because you don't have what it takes. Because if you had what it takes, you'd already done it. And that's why the dream team makes up for the lack of balls, the lack of grit, the lack of whatever other fucking word you want to use. And even though I used my dream team, for example, I'm sitting in La Grande Wii in New York City, having lunch with Governor Hugh Carey, the former governor of New York, who arguably saved the state of New York from bankruptcy, saved it, blah, blah, blah. And he's saying, how's the deal going? I said, we're having trouble, Governor. He said, what? I said, I can't get any fucker to finance this $85 million deal. He asked the maitre d', give me a phone. He says, Walter, this is Walter Wriston, the CEO of Citibank. Walter, can you come over for a martini? No, I'm real busy, Governor. But I said, well, I got a young man I want you to meet. Yeah, maybe you can help him. And then, he says, well, he tells the governor, call my secretary, we'll make an appointment. He hangs up, he says, go over there right now. Okay, I had a drink with him. I went over. Make a long story short, I got $135 million in financing. But without that member of the dream team, how am I going to call Walter Wriston, the CEO of fucking Citibank? I'm not. And I got 100 stories like that. Whereas the dream team member allowed me to do something, allowed it to happen. Plus, my mentees, they were able to facilitate transactions based on their dream team members. It's a simple concept. World-class athletes have coaches, have mentors. Bill Gates' mentor is Warren Buffett. I can go on and on. And now it's vogue to have not just coaches. I mean, you got your sports, you got psychologists, you got this, you got that. I'm not telling you to get all those. What I'm telling you is a mentor, you use it like an anchor chairman. When you have a big building, you want to let 40% of it to General Motors, and then the next 60% is easy because you got General Motors in 40. That's the same concept for chairman, mentors, and the rest of the dream team. Then you go on and collect accountants and law firms on a success fee basis, and yes, they do it on a success fee basis. Now they like it better to be called delaying fees until you have a successful transaction. And all this is on my website. Every single thing that I've said so far is free on my website. Free. You got no excuses. You'll come up with new ones, but you got no excuses. None. And I say this tongue in cheek. I mean, and you're the guys that won the contest. What the fuck? But I told Brian before we got started, if we had picked all the people that lost the contest, the results would be no different. None. Zero. But I'm gonna explain to you why, because I can tell by looking at your fucking stupid faces, you don't understand anything I've said so far. Just because you had a better story and Brian picked you, there's no correlation whatsoever that you're going to use it. Zero. In fact, I would argue there's a reverse correlation. And the people that can't express themselves as well, or had a slightly lesser story to say about why they're not more successful, are more desperate than as desperate as you look and are. And that's been my experience in almost 22 years of doing this. There is no correlation. It's how much you have it in here. I talk about, how committed are you? I just gave a 45-minute webinar, or whatever you call it, for one of my mentees to a sales organization, 200 or 300 people, a couple of weeks ago. And I couldn't be there. I forget where I was. I might have been, I don't know where, anyway. So one of my most famous commitment speeches is in the difference between my generation, me, and you, is that I had an appointment with Klaus Kleinfeld in Frankfurt, Germany, to introduce him to some important people. He had just taken over as CEO of Siemens USA. He hadn't been Siemens America worldwide yet. And they roll me in to the meeting, and there's 4 or 5 people standing there, and Vinica, the one that was on that email that talked to you, I'm in a wheelchair. And this is also on my side. And I've got one of those blankets that the Red Cross puts on you, the silvery, whatever, to keep you warm. And I'm wearing a jogging suit. And my head, I can't straighten my head up. And she rolls me in like this, and Klaus says, "My God, Dan, what happened to you? Why are you here?" I said, "I told you I'd be here." Now, 3 days before, I'd been involved in a near-fatal accident in Cabo San Lucas, racing dune buggies with my 2 sons, where I shattered my collarbone, collapsed all my lungs, punctured my liver, punctured my spleen, cracked my sternum, which is almost impossible to crack, and almost bled to death internally. They patched me up the best they could. I said, I got to be in Frankfurt by the day after tomorrow. See, when I tell you I'm going to do something, unless I'm dead or in a fucking coma, I do it. So I'm giving this talk to this webinar to these guys. Now, coincidentally, 3 hours before the webinar, I'm in the kitchen and I slip on some fucking water and I fall into the wall and knock this tooth out. Right here. I had a black hole there. And I got this webinar in 3 hours. Now, you cunts would have taken a week off. I have a private nurse, personal full-time nurse. I told my nurse, I got to find a fucking dentist. I don't care what time, just get me a fucking dentist. So I go to the dentist, and the dentist says, well, you gotta fix a mold, and all that shit they do. Nah, you're gonna fix the motherfucker right now. I'm gonna snap your little skinny neck, bitch. And I don't have time, no Novocaine, because I don't want my lips like this when I'm talking. So they did the work on me, no Novocaine. And so when I got the end of the commitment talk to these guys, I said, and by the way, 3 hours ago there wasn't a tooth. And I told them the same thing I'm telling you. That's the difference. Where did I learn that commitment from? From my alpha male dad. When I'm 5, 6 years old, he came to Le Havre, France to pick us up when we sailed during the Korean War. My mother and I sailed. He said, I'll see you at Le Havre. I'll pick you up. He didn't tell me I'll pick you up if I'm not feeling well, but he said, I'll pick you up. So I go running up. I'm about this tall. I go running up to my dad, and I put my arms around him like this. Oh, I'm so happy to see you, Daddy. And then I pull my arms back, blood. Soaked blood. So then I step around the back to look. His whole back is from his ass to his shoulder blades, soaked blood. So I'm 5, 6 years old. I go, oh, Daddy, what's wrong? Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Come on, let's get in the car. 8 hours before, he had undergone surgery. 8 hours before. They took a tumor the size of a cantaloupe out of his back. And he wouldn't let him put him under. Sound familiar? And he watched the surgery with mirrors with a .45 automatic on his chest. Cocked. Because my dad was the head of the CID, Criminal Investigation Division for United States Army Europe. And he didn't, this was in the Cold War, and he didn't want to go under where he might tell secrets and shit like that. Then he stitched me up, had local Novocaine, which had already worn off by the time he got to Le Havre. So when you see that growing up, as opposed to your cunt parents, how do you think you're going to turn out? How? You're fucked up because of your mom and dad. They're fucked up because of their mom and dad. I told you, by serendipity, by Allah's goodwill, my mom saw the Reader's Digest version of this book. And my dad was an alpha male who had served in 2 wars. And all I saw was alpha males around me, instead of the miserable cunts you've seen. So there's a difference. Also, when somebody like me tells you I'm going to fuck you up, I mean I'm going to fuck you up. You're not going to get a letter from my lawyer. I'm going to rip your head off and shit down your fucking neck. That's the difference. And those people are still around. They're still available. Not you, but your dream team. Not you, but your dream team. And we've made it work for a little mealy mouth, 95-pound nobodies to 6'7", 300-pound ex-American footballers. But again, it's what you have in here. How bad do you really want it? Most people, if you get nothing more from today's event, well, it's not for me. You're a lucky man, a lucky guy, a lucky whoever. Lucky that you found out cheap. Cheap in time. Because money we can always make back, time you can't. I had one of my, at the castle we have this wall is influencers. There's about 100 people that have influenced my life. The back wall is Hall of Famers, and this wall is Hall of Shamers, most of which have gone to jail. in the Hall of Shame and the Hall of Fame, they're both the same, high performance. Just as Adolf Hitler, who's on my wall over here, Stalin, Mao Zedong, Vlad the Impaler, all high performance people. You know, high performance doesn't mean you're goody two-shoes. High performance means you get shit done in spite of the circumstances. I'm happiest when the shit hits the fan. You know, it's a sexual experience for me. It's like when I floated Great Western these many years ago, I picked my 39th birthday, August 10th, 1984, to float. All the pundits, all the city guys said, no, 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 no. Maggie Thatcher's coming out with her first big privatization of Jaguar, for those of you that are old enough to remember. I said, who gives a shit? Just like I don't care if it's Easter or fucking, who gives a shit? The old hag, I don't give a fuck what she did. Dan, every pound and pence is going to be sucked into that privatization. No, it's not. They're going to, my deal. Oh, the guy, oh no, Freshfields were my lawyers. I had two of the big 8 accounting firms. So I personally sold, not with the help of my stockbrokers, I personally sold every fucking share. I remember pitching the Church of England, the Bank of England, all these people. The morning, August the 11th, the headlines read, the one that really roared, Great Western Resources up 20%, Jaguar down 20%. I get a sexual experience every time I see a fucking Jag or I sit in one. I personally fought the city by myself and brought them to their motherfucking knees. To the best of my knowledge, there hasn't been a deal like that since, nor never will be. And I didn't. We had to convince the takeover panel for the first time in the history, and I don't know how long the stock exchange has been around, but in the first time of the history of the London Stock Exchange, someone took something public they didn't own. I had an option. It was the first option ever to that time to ever be floated, taken public. An option. I didn't even own the shit I took public. $15, $20, $30 people followed me. They changed the law, changed the rule. So then I went to the Netherlands, did the exact same fucking thing. Took an option public. And if the law hadn't been changed worldwide, I'd still be taking the motherfucking options public. Because you'd think that mailing heads like you would figure, well, that's a good fucking idea. Just like smell the leather. You know how many people have taken option publics that I've ever met? In 31 years? Maybe in another 31. When Richard Branson's jet plane or rocket ship went down 6 months ago, 8 months ago, killed that poor guy. Do you think, did that slow Sir Richard down any? I'm sure he cares about the guy that died, as he should. Got him a lot of publicity. Fallout was minimal. Just kept moving forward. Do you think Sir Richard gives a fuck what you think? In any way, shape, manner, or form? No! Only you care! Because you want to be liked. And in some cases, you even want to be loved. And you trade love and like for money. I've told my children since they were little, since they were, like they said, we've been listening to the 5 Credo crap since we were second trimester in our mother's tummy. I don't want your love. I want 20 years after I'm dead, your respect. Now, that's a heavy-duty thing for a parent to say to their kid. Your dad's love's not helping you. Now you all look like you just saw a fucking ghost. Do you think Steve Jobs gave a shit what you thought of him? And I don't like to talk bad about people that are dead. But he was a ruthless cocksucker. Full stop. Friends are problems. Now just imagine me raising my kids, my 3 kids. Friends are problems when they're 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. Just try to ponder that a second. I'm not tight with my kids. I have 1 disabled child. Other 2 are successful. They went to great schools, multiple degrees. You don't have to go to school to be successful. You don't have to have multiple degrees like they do. They did it that way because I didn't, so they did. Although I did get out of university after flunking out 3 times. But you're starting to see the differences. I'm just touching on some of the more salient points. What differentiates me, not just the way I look, not just the way I sound, to give you some idea why, for most of you in this room, the QLA process isn't for you. And I'm not trying to negative sell you. Trust me. So don't get that out of your shit brain. But it's not. Like I told a successful lady lawyer yesterday afternoon. You saw her when she was, Brian, when she was just leaving. She's the older sister of one of my mentees. I told her that I listened to her story. She was a lawyer at 20. You know, she here, and I said, "This isn't for you, sweetheart. No. I hope you didn't waste too much time coming down to see me." Because I'm not trying to sell you anything. You know, one of my billionaire guys on the Hall of Fame says, Dan tells you what we like to tell you, but don't have the balls to. But the high performance guys that I know, other than, they think I'm wasting my time trying to teach melonheads like you to be successful, they think it's a joke. Actually, they think it's worse than that. And the fact that I give all the shit, I had dinner here about a year and a half ago with one of the top guys in the UK, a mentee of mine, and he said, Dan, we can't compete with you. Forget the 800 into almost half a billion. Forget that you've been in the council for 30 years. Forget this, that, and the other thing. Now you give all the shit away free. Your USP is, off the charts. And you don't want to sell them anything. The only reason I still have the council seminar, because for the few that I touch personally, there's a higher probability that you're going to make it. But 99% of all the people that have made it with QLA, I have never met, never spoken to, never touched, never emailed, sky-fucked, link-fucked, face-fucked. 99% of them. You don't need me. The 1% that I've touched, I've laid hands on, like a spiritual cult leader revivalist. I've laid hands on them. Now, truthfully, those are the billionaires. I laid hands on those motherfuckers. But if you just want to make 50 million quid or something like that, go fuck yourself, leave now. You don't need me. And in the old days, just like in that Whiplash, I used to hit the guys. Literally, in the 90s and early 2000s, I used to smack them, knock them, hit them. Now, I guess I am getting politically correct because I don't do that anymore. Not that I'm afraid to. I've had people come up to me and say, Dan, please, hit me in the face. Look around the room, see who's a witness, No. I remember I had a Special Forces guy. I had a French Foreign Legion guy, too. I've had a lot of them. Come on, give it to me. I've had a 4th degree or 6th degree Dan, 6th Dan, black belt, bad motherfucker, supposedly. I did hit him. I had to hit him because he didn't think I could hit him. Knocked him unconscious. On top of it, I'm still pretty tough, which is the irony of all this. But when I was younger, I was really tough. Now I just sound tough, but I used to be really tough. Sound tough. About 5-6 years ago, I'm in Panama, and I'd never been offered a bribe by a former president before until I was there. And some guy, some guy was a loudmouth, and I said, okay. And he was a 35-year-old ex-this, bodybuilder, this, blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, asshole, come on, let's go out in the parking lot, let's see how tough you are. Now, this is when I weighed 280, and I was a weightlifter. And I gave up weightlifting a number of years ago because my knees, and for every pound you got up here, it's 40 pounds on your knees. But I used to be a big motherfucker. And I said, but he was a big motherfucker, and he was about half my age. Now, fortunately for him, he says, no, I don't want any problem with you, Mr. Pena. Because I'm sure that he had the capability of kicking my ass. But I didn't think about it. I don't care, see? One of the things high-performance people do is they put themselves in a corner so there's no alternative but success. They put themselves, their back against the wall. And you've been trained to do just the opposite of that. I put myself with my back's against the wall. I told Brian QLA Rose, after our first interview, he walked me downstairs, we're waiting for a cab, right? Okay? I said words of the effect, I can change your life, right? He's shaking yes, I can change your life. And I have. It's been a hard fucking thing. It's like, you've all seen the movie Forrest Gump. And Forrest Gump, when he's dragging all the people to safety, you know, he's running back. He was looking for Bubba, and he's running back, and to save all these people. And like Lieutenant Dan didn't want to be saved. The kicking and screaming. That's why my wife said I got a sore back from arthritis, is because I'm carrying so many fuckers across the goal line. So I mean, he hasn't made it easy. He's still not making it easy. When we talk about the case studies, I'll show you exactly where intellectually he understands what he should be doing, but emotionally he's not doing it. Because we got two bank accounts in life. We got an emotional bank account, we got a financial bank account. Now Brian the Mustard, he's made real progress since he learned how to deal better with his emotional bank account. But him being a Canadian, Canadians are all cunts, I mean, it's not easy. And sitting next to a Canadian, Canadian, well, oh fuck. That's too bad. Anyway, but I mean, so we got an emotional bank account, we got a financial bank account, and most of you are concerned about the wrong bank account. You're concerned with the financial bank account. And it's your emotional bank account, your self-esteem, self-worth, etc., that leads to your financial bank account being built. I got a couple big awards from where I went to school. Ultimately graduated. I was on the 8-year program for my undergraduate degree, 8 years. But I spent 4 years in the military, but 8 years, and I got this big award as the most distinguished alumni. And they're talking to Dr. Shirley Teeter, the head of the School of Business. Dr. Teeter, you've known Mr. Pena a long, long time. This is Connie Chung, who used to be an anchor for CBS a long time ago. And he says, yes, well, you've seen him grow up, da-da-da-da-da. What have you seen change in him in all these years? Nothing. The only thing that's happened with Danny, they used to call me, is that his accomplishments have caught up with his big fucking mouth. Now, this is Dan Pena Day, where I went to school. What kind of shit is that to say about me? It's true. So, 10 years later, or no, sooner, that was the same thing, and a similar result from somebody who's getting the award, and this is I got the award. I was Hispanic Man of the Year in 1981 or 83 or something. I got some big award because I'm a minority. I'm a blue-eyed Hispanic. Anyway, and I'm going through my acceptance speech. There's about 3,000 people in the audience, and about where Robert is sitting, my dad's sitting in the first row. I get about 15, 20, 30 seconds into the talk. My dad starts sobbing uncontrollably. Like that. Okay. Now I'm a pretty focused motherfucker. So I'm trying to block this shit out, and I had a 3, a 7, and 11-minute speech. I hadn't planned the different speeches because I thought my dad was going to start sobbing. And I got through it. I got through the 7 minutes. I said 3 minutes is too short. I'm getting a big fucking award. I got to talk more than 3 minutes. So I'm focused, and so I get through it. So then they're interviewing him again. They put a microphone in front of my dad's face, and they ask him, "You must be very proud of your son." And he says, "Yes, I am." About his accomplishments, his success, et cetera, et cetera. But my son Dan is successful not because of me, but in spite of me. I'm going to say it again. He's successful not because of me, but in spite of me. Because my dad knew that he had nothing to do with my success. What he didn't know, when I told him years later, you gave me integrity, strength, alpha male role model. Yeah, example, exactly. But as far as the business, all he used to say when he came to the castle, he was at the castle once, and he just says, "Tell me it's not drugs. Tell me it's not drugs." Now, this is a cop from East LA, okay? Went to Lincoln High School. But my dad's emotional bank account wasn't too strong. He had big balls, wasn't afraid, fought in 2 wars, etc. But his father died 3 months before he was born. He was the youngest of 7. He was supporting his family as a shoeshine boy during the Depression, bootleg. He would do packages, he put them in the shoeshine box, and that's how he supported his family. When he was 7, starting at 7. I started working when I was 11. Okay. It's like Napoleon Hill says, the worst thing you can do is leave your children, they could be born into wealth. Okay? Bill Gates and guys like that, they're doing a little different. He's giving each kid 10 million or whatever. He's not going to give them the billions. Warren Buffett's doing the same. I'm giving my kids 0. Fuck all, nothing, not 50 pence. Nothing. They are completely cut out of my estate. And my wife and I, God love her, are doing the very best. We're never going to spend all our money. I have to live to be 1,000. But we're doing our fucking best, though. And we support charities. We support 3 orphanages in the Philippines, a school in Rwanda, a mission in Sri Lanka, something else, and a scholarship fund where we give 4 to 8 scholarships for high school student athletes where my dad used to go to high school. But we're doing something about where we see there's need, but we had to create the wealth first. Instead of carrying placards around the embassy complaining about bullshit. And that's more in the mode that you guys are in. So I'm different. And I don't care what you think. And I've had a whole string of successes now with guys that are equally as stupid as you. One of my great success stories is a guy with 1 O-level, okay? How many Brits in the room? Okay, you know what an O-level is, right? Okay. His O-level was in joinery. He got a C. Now, during the break, not that I don't want you to bond, the Brits can explain what that means, getting a C in joinery for his only O-level. He and I did a $450 million deal. At the time, it was one of the biggest privatizations. It was a healthcare, public to private. It was Crestacare and Four Seasons merger, and with 1 O-level. But the guy had big balls. Very persevering, and he wanted it. Maybe because he only had 1 O-level. It's like 1.0 level is like you graduated from junior high school when you're 15 years old before you go into high school. That's what I call the equivalent. It's not exactly that. And you can do it. And why do I still coach? Why do I still coach? I coach because I get off on bringing sorry cunts across the goal line. I'm living vicariously through your successes. And fortunately, I'm very good at it, so I've got a lot of things to be happy about. But because I'm not trying to make money off you or etc., I can tell you, and the mentor program, although I don't expect any of you to come to the castle, I already told Brian that, but the mentor program after the castle is for free. I mentor you for a year for free. So that means I can throw you out any fucking time I want. Well, I'd throw you out even if you were paying for it. But I mean, it's for free. And his class is already 4 down. 4 down. January's class is already 2 down. August class is 9 down. Maybe 10. Yeah, 9 or 10. I've thrown them out. No, I've thrown them out. I've thrown them out. We had one guy in January's class that resigned at the graduation dinner. He never even started. Although he gave a great testimony, it's a great program, but an Irish guy, after a couple of glasses of wine and some Jameson, he said, "This ain't for me. I'm not going to do this shit." And he was successful. He's one of the more successful guys to come through the seminar. But that's great. But it's not everybody's cup of tea. It's certainly not everybody's cup of tea. But it's the only legal way that I know at age almost 70 where you can take what normally takes a generation, 20 to 25 years, you can create the same wealth in 3 to 7 years. 3 years if you're a dynamo fucking par excellence, 5 years if you're average, and 7 years if you're a fucking melon head. That would normally take you a generation, depending on what you want to count a generation, 20 to 25 years. And we've done it over and over and over and over again. And I find it insulting that I have to keep telling people, most of the people, and if I had been coming to this to listen to me, I would have read every fucking thing on my website. Every single thing. I know more about you as individuals than you know about me. And that's a sad commentary. Not from my end, but on your end. But that's how you approach life. And unless you're willing to make that jump across the chasm, that quantum leap, this is a waste of your time and money. And the time is more important than the money. We're going to take a break now, a pee break or whatever. Normally I don't take breaks. Okay, that's easier to get them to pee their pants if you don't take breaks, but yeah, that's a whole other story. But we're going to take a short break, 10 minutes.
Yeah, 10 minutes, there's coffee outside, bathrooms over here.
Yeah.
Back in here in 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much.